What's up, everybody? It's Reggie Williams, founder and CEO of Ambrosia for Heads. And with me, I have Jake Payne, our editor-in-chief. And together, this is our What's the Headline podcast. What's going on, man?
Yo, man, what's up? I want to start with a question. Did you, how many all-nighters did you pull in college, like truly studying?
All-nighters? Wow, that's a crazy question. How many all-nighters did I pull? I'd say I probably did like 2 a year, maybe 2 or 3, probably like eight to 10, something like that. How about you?
I think I did one ever, but I'm not as well educated as you are. I stopped after 4 years. You kept going. But yeah, for me it was one. I asked that because, there have been times in hip hop. Well, let me ask you, have there been times in your hip hop media career, that you pulled an all-nighter?
Hip hop, no. The only time I pulled all-nighters in work was back when I was a lawyer, way back when. Yeah.
I once, so back in like 2008, when I was at another publication, we were partners with Rock the Bells, the concert tour, and we were their media partner. So we would do a bunch of things. And one time, I had to get us from, I think, Boston to DC overnight. And not only did I was leading that company editorially, but I was also the driver. And I'm real funny about people driving, my car. And I drove all night and worked 2 days. So in hip hop, I've pulled as many, maybe more all-nighters. But I say that, I asked that because you and I were talking very early this morning, like after midnight. And here we are right back in the early hours of Monday, February 6th, with a little bit of rest. Certainly no all-nighter, but it makes you feel alive. It makes you feel committed when you can do that. And there have been several times you and I have done stuff in our travels and whatnot where we've operated on 2, 3, 4 hours of sleep. I think it was South by Southwest.
Yeah, for sure, man. And no coffee for me. Like, one of the things I've given up for 2023 is coffee. Haven't had a month. I figured. Yeah.
I've minimized my vices in this world, but coffee is definitely one of them. And I never want to be one of those people that's like, I haven't had my coffee yet. But I do look forward. Like, oftentimes my favorite part of the day is the first song I play, or just kind of press and play on my music and that first sip of coffee. And I get to share it with you and anyone that's listening now.
No, man, I'm just crazy. I'm just crazy sensitive to it. If I had coffee at any point in the day, I will be awake at night. I'll feel it the next day. Like, I get tight. If I have it past 11, like, it's crazy. But
11 a.m.
It's not as bad with like tea and soda and stuff like that. But coffee, it's something about it, man.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never really had that. I try not to drink it after about 1 or 2 in the afternoon. I only have 2 cups a day, never 3. I have 3, but I look forward to that most days. And yeah, man, it's funny. Anytime you and I saw each other a couple weeks ago and I went to grab a cup of coffee, I said, hey, man, can I get you one? And you look like I was trying to buy you meth, man. You're like, no, I'm good.
Again. Like, yeah, man, it's been a month. It's been a month and counting. So we'll see. We'll see.
Nice.
Yeah. I cut back on alcohol too, man. I try and do that on the weekends now. Everything,
Yeah, I had taken a month off and I was doing swimmingly at it. And then, I'm in the process of getting married, and we picked a date and some folks showed up with some wine, and I indulged this weekend. But it's funny, like, typically the weekend, I'm somebody that, that's often how I unwind. I like wine. I like liquor. Fan of cheap beer, and but I really sat it back. Like, I abstained last night during the Grammys. At one point, I thought of all the years I've covered it, all the different places I've worked, but there were a lot of them. I will always associate Grammy night with AFH. There was a lot of times in the last close to 10 years now where you've been in the building, and actually Amanda Mester, who was a big part of our site in the mid 2010s, she and I were texting, remembering we kind of did a DEF CON together where I think we had Thai food and some wine, and we were covering, like, she would do a story, I would do a story. So last night I had one little vodka and juice drink, and it didn't even sit right. I'd stopped drinking it. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, I remember in past years I've been super excited for the Grammys. This year, I don't know, I felt differently about it. Like, I went into the show oftentimes now, well, like you said, I've been many, many times at this point, probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 times, something like that. And that weekend is always crazy. You go out, you typically get out on a Friday. My guy Ted Reed, shout out to Ted, has a party on Wednesdays. He kind of owns that like Wednesday, like early evening slot. Bunch of professionals, a lot of Black professionals in the music industry and adjacent to the music industry. It's a great look, great reunion. And then it's just like nonstop, just party hopping all day. You start, drinking, like smoozing like at noon. There's usually a brunch or 11 o'clock most days. You eventually get numb to it because you're with the same people at every party. It's kind of traveling, a lot of stars, a lot of executives. And it's a great hang. It's a great way to reconnect. It's one of those places where you kind of go to be seen, to let people know that you're still you're still in the industry and all that stuff. And then Showtime is funny, man, because a lot of people, it's kind of 50-50. A lot of people just go for the party and for hanging. But then a lot of people don't really actually care about going to the show. Those who do tend to be like at the most senior level, like, and they've got a skin in the game, either artists for a record company or, key programmers, like you always see Stephen Hill, my old boss there, and people like that. But I always enjoyed going to the show itself, because if you are a music lover, dude, like it's held in, it sounds corny to even say now, but crypto.com arena, formerly Staples Center. And you've been to concerts and arenas, right?
yeah, I mean, I've been in that venue too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so a venue, the sound is never like being in like a small venue.
Right.
But dude, whatever they do, whoever's mixing it and setting up the boards and everything, it is the most pristine sound you will ever hear in a live venue. It doesn't matter that it holds 20,000 people. It sounds incredible. And so I always enjoyed the show, man. You get like music's finest all in one place. You'll get 20 performances, 30 different performers, all different genres. So as a music lover, man, it was always fantastic.
Is there a I see the light, like, is there a top moment that you've experienced in the building? Because I know you've gone to the ones that were in New York too. Like, was there a Grammy highlight for you?
Man, the one that comes to mind is when Kendrick had just lost the Grammy to Macklemore, appropriately called The Heist, his album. He lost Kid Mad City lost to The Heist. And then after that, about 20 minutes after that, Kendrick performed with Imagine Dragons, and they did a mashup of Radioactive and Good Kid, Mad City, and Mad City especially, and it was just absolutely incredible. And Kendrick like let all of his like frustration out on the stage that night. The energy, it was we did the headline. I thought it was a bigger moment than if he even won the Grammy, because and let people know this dude is here and he is a star and like will not be denied.
It's funny, man. I think of that night all the time and I cringe, not because of Macklemore and Ryan Lewis Heist, but it was funny. That was our first real year. That was 2014. So you and I had started working together the previous July of 2013. So that was our first Grammys. And it's funny, there's like 3 women in my family, including 2 of my closest aunts and my grandmother who's now passed, that all have birthdays this week. And I remember that night being at dinner, you were in the building and you texted me like, hey, if something breaks, are you down to cover it? And I'm like eating pasta and I'm like, oh man, I got to get home. And it was funny. I mean, it was a very different internet then, but we were really not, I mean, it was Ambrosia was 4 years old at the time, just about, but it was funny, like how we handle that now versus even today in this iteration of the site, how we handle it, where, it's funny just to kind of segue into this year. You and I had talked about like, hey, what are the things that we might, cover on the site? What are the things that we might talk about? And then lo and behold, at about 5 o'clock yesterday, they've already started announcing awards. And one of the things I'm noticing is, sure, your classical and your jazz and some of your folk and those gospel, those deeper categories never seem to make the TV time unless there's a real, touch point of, a legacy artist that might be their last or something like that. But they called 3 hip hop awards before the show ever started last night. And we were prepared. We didn't cover things until later because there was kind of a motif of the night. But it's just funny to watch how we once were versus how we now are. And we treat this probably a lot more like sports or politics than anything else.
Yeah, man. In terms of like what's televised and what's not, it feels to me like it's regressing. There was a time where you got at least 2 rap awards, on air. And for the genre that is, categorically the biggest genre in the world, for it to only have 1 representation on air is insane to me, especially when you look at the presence of the performances and stuff like that. I don't know, man. Something is off about that to me.
I think I'll shoot the Grammys some bail on this one. I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said, but this year in particular, in the rap categories, with the exception of melodic rap, the nominees were very redundant. You had Kendrick in every category, you had Khaled in several of them. And I also have to imagine, and you may know more about this than I do, they look at who's coming. Like at some point, they have to know who RSVP'd yes and no. And did you see Pusha T in the building last night?
Yeah, Pusha was there. He was there for the, he had kind of a salty look on his face when the best rap album award was announced.
Interesting. Second, it would be the second time this has happened to him since the 2009 awards. And going into that year, I was really excited, as you may have been, about Daytona. But I'm just curious if they look and they say, like, where are the things? Because I do remember in years past multiple rap categories, because that was the year Drake came up in 2019 and kind of spoke ill of the Grammys very subliminally and not so subliminally, and they started playing the music. And of course that was the year that Cardi B also made history as the first female solo artist to win Best Rap Album for Invasion of Privacy.
Yeah, I would think that at the very least it would have both Best Rap Album and Best Rap Record. I can see not having rap record and rap song because there's a ton of redundancy there, but the single versus the album, I think you got to have it.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that we'll see that in future years, but this year, and maybe that's why, getting back to what you said, you and I both came into this. I know, we both did a podcast late last year where we picked some winners, but this wasn't one where there was a whole lot of subtext of, Drake going against Pusha T or, just other examples of that. You don't have a JAY-Z album going against the Kendrick Lamar album. It was just a little different.
Yeah, it was more Kendrick verse versus Jay verse. Hard Part 5 versus God Did. So
yep.
Yeah, man. All right, well, so let's get into talking about the Grammys, man. Like one of the things that I talked about the lead up to the Grammys and how important that is. There's a couple things that happened. I know on Thursday night there was an event where Lil Wayne, I believe Sylvia Rome, I think Missy and Dr. Dre got honored. I heard that was incredible. But the thing that I saw the most news about over the weekend was Slick Rick's Lifetime Achievement Award. You had covered this. We talked about this too before, right? That he was getting it. I'm mixed about these. I'm glad that legends like him and Public Enemy and it was Run DMC,
Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, and then Salt and Pepper got it, but they got it. We don't remember that because they got it in 2021, which was the year Grammys, they got pushed back. And that was, I don't remember a lot about that year because it wasn't to the back like it is now.
Well, I love the fact that these folks are given their flowers now, I wish they had gotten them real time, but it is what it is. You can't go back and change the past. So it's great that it's happening now. But Slick Rick is the recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award this year, or one of them, I should say. Yeah. And, as an after party, Russell Simmons, obviously founder and former owner of Def Jam, which is where Slick Rick was signed, hosted an event at Culina Ristorante and Cafe in LA. and it was like a who's who of people coming through just to like pay their respect to Slick Rick. So you saw pictures on the gram of Busta Rhymes, MC Light, D Nice, Nas was there. You know, Nas has a lot, that he owes to Slick Rick based on the storytelling that Rick crafted so well, and Nas took to another level. And then you had Anthony Hamilton, Swiss Beats, Curtis Blow was there, Joey Badass, Jermaine Dupri, DJ Cassidy. It looked like a real star-studded affair for Slick Rick. So that was dope.
Yeah, I had some folks and colleagues that were in there, and they were just saying great things about the party. You love to see that. Obviously, every year, one of the hardest tickets or hardest invites to get is the Roc Nation Brunch. And this year, I think the big headline of that was Lil Kim was there. You know, obviously she had worked with Jay-Z early in her career. They're kind of contemporaries to a certain degree of both, you know, coming, you know, to stardom in the mid 90s and both being close associates of Big. That was cool. There was a photo of Kim and Beyonce. And even last night, you know, Trevor Noah referred to Beyonce as the Queen Bee. And, you know, I was remembering the subtext there. And obviously everyone that's affiliated with Roc Nation, from Rhapsody to DJ Khaled, to, you know, Kaylin For Real, all like a list of who's who was all in there. And that was good too, because I don't think that they've done that brunch in the last couple of years, but that always becomes just, you know, it kind of lets you know, or lets the public know, you know, who J and B are messing with. And that's cool too. But yeah, those two events I think were huge.
Yeah, Roc Nation Brunch was always my favorite event. You know, I was fortunate enough to go to several, including the inaugural one. First one ever was in Soho House in LA. And dude, the gift bag was it was a Gucci bag that held the stuff. So your actual gift bag was Gucci, and it was a bunch of stuff, including an iPad holder that was Gucci, a leather Gucci iPad holder. It was insane. It had to be $500 at least per bag. And it was the craziest receiving line I've ever seen. At one point, there was it was B, J, and then Will Smith all together, just like, you know, in a line, like people just going through, just dapping them up, saying what's up and everything. That was insane. The craziest thing that happened to me at that one was that I saw Ellen Pompeo from Grey's Anatomy. You know, she plays the lead character in Grey's Anatomy.
Okay.
And she says to me, "Are you Stevie J?" I'm like, the hell are you talking about? I don't look like no damn Stevie J. Like,
you look more like Stevie B than Stevie J. That's hilarious.
So I'm like, nah, you know, I'm not Stevie J, right? But then in a surreal moment, about 20 minutes later, I'm walking through and I see Stevie J. And this is literally right after the first season of Love and Hip Hop had premiered, and he's like readjusting because his head, like, people knew Stevie J prior to that as producer for Bad Boy, like, you know, the Biggie hits and stuff like that. But then he was a total villain on Love and Hip Hop. So I look at him and, you know, he looks at me and he says, "What's up, brother?" And I said, "I'm good, man. You?" He's like, "Ah, man, you know, I'm all right. I'm just trying to remind people, like, you know, who I am out here." And I'm like, "Man, your catalog speaks for itself." And he said, "Wow, thank you, my brother." You know, so we had a cool moment and everything, but I thought that was hilarious. But that was my my first Roc Nation brunch, you know.
Damn, that's you never told me that story before. That's man, I got gift bag envy. That would have been great to re-gift to people. So
yeah, they're the best gift bag I ever had at the Grammys. So I went with this. There's an OG lawyer named Joel Katz, who has represented everyone from James Brown to, like, you know, the biggest names in the world, right, and biggest companies. And he was a consultant for MTV when I was there one year. I think it was like 2007. So my first, I think, Grammy Clive Davis dinner that I went to, because Clive has this dinner, you know, the night before. There's always the heaviest party in the heaviest room, heaviest party at the place. Like, everyone is there. And so before we go to that party, you know, Joel's got a limo. We go to the Best Buy party. And I'm like, "Joel, why are we going to the Best Buy party?" And he says, "Because they got the best gift bags in town." And I was like, okay, cool. And so again, this is 2007, right? We leave and there's a digital camera and like, you know, $100 gift certificate to Best Buy and stuff like that. This is before even like cameras were like that good in phones.
Yeah.
So that was probably $1,000 gift bag. But before we left, there was a guy rolling up cigars and handmade cigars, right? And Joe was like, "Yeah, just grab one if you want." And I was like, "No, I'm good." And he said, "No, you know, just you never know." So I grab a cigar, right? I stick it in my jacket pocket. We go to Clive Davis's dinner, and I'm sitting between Joel and on my left is Kid Rock. And so Kid Rock and I start having a conversation, right? And we're talking, you know, throughout the night and everything. And at one point he goes, "Man, I wish I had a cigar." He's like, "Yo, you know," he asked the dude next to him, "You get a cigar?" And then says, "Nah." He looks at me and I said, "Yo, kid." And I pulled out like cigar from my thing and gave it to him. And he was like, "Yo, that was the coolest shit I ever saw in my life. That was the cool." And he starts bringing people over and telling them the story. Like
Yeah.
I see him the next day and I introduced him to you know, my wife at that time. He was like, "Yo, that was the coolest shit I've ever seen, man." Like so that
That's
was
cool.
my moment with Kid Rock, man. It was crazy.
Yeah, people forget. I'm not a Kid Rock apologist. He's said and done things, but people forget early in his career. You know who one of his big co-signers were, and I think produced on one of maybe both of his first two albums for Jive.
Uh, I remember, but I forget who is that.
The TR 808, D Nice.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
They
I
were
don't think
label
I knew
mates at
that.
Jive. Yeah, yep. So
Wow, that's wild. Yeah, man. Yeah, he was a cool dude in person. I know his politics have gone left as of late, but you know, was definitely a good time with me. You know,
that's
so
dope, man.
yeah.
So let me ask you, having seen that, why don't we start at the very top? From the minute the show began, how did you feel about, Trevor Noah and his opening monologue?
You know, it was cool. It was interesting to me because I was thinking monologues have changed now, and comedians, their approach has changed post the slap. You know, he had kid gloves on.
Yeah.
Everything was very, very PG, not even PG-13, and complimentary. The closest he got was, I think, talking about Harry Styles, like having the women, you know, throw their panties at him, and then he puts them on and wears them better than them. I thought that was the most risque he gets.
Yeah.
But I was definitely thinking about that moment with Will and Chris, and you know, I also wondered if more people tuned in because, you know, after that moment, it made you realize the power of live TV again. But what did you think of the monologue?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. There were like, Trevor Noah is, very clearly a great comedian. I've listened to his memoir and I've seen his stand up, but he went very PG, leaned into some dad jokes. I mean, let's not forget this is CBS, and there are constant reminders from, the performers to the layout of the show that this is something that, a 15-year-old is supposed to watch, and a 75-year-old is supposed to watch, and they try to lean young but meet them all in the middle. I thought he did fine, but you're right. I mean, post slap, the way the room was laid out with those tables, more like the Golden Globes this year, there's a tension there. I mean, just in the times we live in, just the way that social media works, like I'm watching people's faces and I'm watching reactions. And maybe this year that's what the Grammys wanted. They wanted to create a lot of, not tension, but have some of that drama with the reaction. But I thought he handled himself well. And I had even forgotten that Harry Styles joke because it didn't seem like there was any roasting of the room. It was more so like a David Letterman or a Daily Show type of monologue.
Yeah, you know, and it's also part flex, that opening monologue. You know, he's walking from table to table because they want the audience to see who's in the building, you know, for
Yeah.
the star power. And interestingly, Beyonce was not there, even though he said verbally that Beyonce's in the room.
Yeah.
And he also said that Kendrick Lamar was there, and I don't think Kendrick was there either at that point. So yeah, it was interesting.
There were a couple of times in the night where I don't think the production crew could find the guest, and I knew that early. And let me ask you, just since you mentioned right there, it was one of the things I wanted to ask you on this episode. Do you think it was traffic, or do you think it was deliberate that either of those two, and I'm lumping J and B together, and then Kendrick, do you think that was deliberate to be late or something else?
I think deliberate. I think deliberate for sure. You know, Beyonce is going to be the last person in the room. You know, Beyonce is. I mean, we now know she's the most, you know, decorated artist ever. She is, I think, the biggest presence in a room like that. You know, it's just even over Jay. You know, Jay obviously is, you know, especially after this week, we can talk about that a little bit too. You know, probably the wealthiest artist in the room, but Beyonce is I think the biggest star in the room, and she owns that. You know, Kendrick, like, it would not surprise me if Kendrick came for his award and then dipped. I never saw him again after that. And, you know, I think that, you know, you and I have talked about this before. He has a very complicated relationship with the Grammys at this point, in that he is their darling for sure. And he's done a lot for the Grammys in terms of performances and things like that. And really does, I think they were very strategic in their roll up to this, Kendrick and Dave Free, in terms of things they were doing to like help get out the vote for themselves. But at the same time, I think there's a recognition that the Grammys have not done right by them in the past. You know, we talked about the Macklemore thing. There's I think it was Adele who won the best album over Damn, even though that album went on to win a Pulitzer. There've been to Pepper Butterfly didn't win, even though it was the most nominated album. There's Grammys are sketchy with Kendrick, and I think that, you know, he and Dave recognized that, and he went to get his awards, say what he had to say, and even when he did his speech, it wasn't super engaged. You know, there wasn't a ton of stuff there. So I think both were intentional. But what about you?
Yeah, and I also think we're living in a time where celebrities and superstars of that level want a controlled environment, you know, even down to like the Roc Nation Brunch. You know, J and B are very careful. Their team analyzes every photo that leaves that event, and they don't let major, you know, even photo companies come to that, you know, people that specialize in celebrity photos. It is about, and we've talked about this other places, it's about controlling your brand and your image and your likeness. And, you know, from Dr. Dre, like, he was the first hip hop artist I remember that of, like, I'm not going to be at every event. I'm going to show up when I know, A, you know, you're not going to make an ass out of me, and B, if it's a certain level of prestige. And yeah, I think you're right. I just don't think that Kendrick and Jay and Beyonce at this point in their careers want to position themselves to be approached by anybody and everybody. Like, there's a lot at stake. And, you know, Jay, I mean, obviously had an out because his performance closed the night. But yeah, I think you're right. And I don't think anyone should be upset with that. Up until rollout time, I was, which is again a segue, I was curious whether Kendrick would actually show, because as we alluded to, before the night began, he won 2 awards that he was not there to receive, because the Grammys had a private feed on their website, and they were posting award winners on social media. And for the 2 awards that Kendrick won, he wasn't there. And I was like, I wonder if we're going to see him tonight. And I think you and I even exchanged texts of whether or not he would show.
Yeah, and just as an aside, like, he was wearing the hat and the sunglasses. Did it seem to you like he cut his hair? Because the hat didn't have like a ton of room on it, and I didn't see anything coming out of the back either.
Yeah, maybe so. But I mean, even down to that, it's funny. Like, again, like, I think, again, like, people are controlling their image. Like, I'm not going to give you the greatest shot of me. And I think there's power in that. It was at the Grammys where Prince, you know, wore a slave across his forehead, right?
Yeah, I was not there, but yeah.
But I mean, like, you know, it's a complicated relationship too of this is the Recording Academy. These are superstars, you know, even down to the final thing of the night, DJ Khaled, you know, kind of thanking the Academy. There's a lot of pomp and circumstance here. There's a lot of, you know, bow to your savior, but you don't also feel that way. And I love the fact that you don't get that from, you know, the people that we truly look up to, Kendrick, Jay, Beyonce. Like, no, they're there on their own terms, and they might not be there next year, but they came out last night. And I definitely think, as an overall, the Grammys leveled up because they were there, because there have been years recently where some of those big heavy hitters have not been in the building.
For sure, for sure. I want to come back to that, but just real quick on the Kendrick thing. The reason why I asked the question is because often when there's a major shift like that, because Kendrick has had long hair and braids now for 5-6 years. It's been a long time. Often when there's a major shift like that, it's accompanying a new project. You know, because often with a new project comes a new image. And I speculated, I think you and I got a side bet. I don't remember if we bet in public, but I'm gonna memorialize it now so people can like go back and check the record. But I think that Kendrick's gonna come back with a new album sooner rather than later, definitely sometime this year, and maybe even springtime like he typically does. I think that they want to put a little bit of juice in the tank of PG Lang, and it would make a lot of sense for him to have a new look for a new era in his career. You know, PG Lang over TDE, new album with a new sound and new look. So just, you know, that's my guess.
I've accused you of tinfoil hat behavior before, but I think that's really smart. Like honestly, like we've seen that with Jay even. Like we've gotten to a place where I can look at a photo of Jay-Z and guess within a 2 or 3 year window. Just like we know the hair, we know the facial hair, we know the suits, the clothes. I think that's true of J. Cole. I think that's true of Eminem. Like, and Kendrick is very, very deliberate about that. And you make a good case. Now, to let the public know, if I'm right and he doesn't release an album, you got to take me out to a really nice steak dinner somewhere. If you're right and he does put out an album, we're going to Sizzler.
We're going where? Sizzler.
Yeah.
Okay. I got a question for you. Given how the night played out in terms of awards, and we'll get into that in detail in a few minutes, but given how the night played out, do you think Jay and Beyoncé stay had he not been performing at the end?
That's a really good question. No. And I was really thrown off as an aside to that. Oh, well, before I continue, what do you say?
I say no too.
Yeah.
I think they. I don't even know if they show actually. You know, I think they showed because they thought that. Well, I think he only agreed to perform, and they only showed because they thought this is going to be the year that she got the big one. You know,
it ends with her winning, album of the year, and it goes into Jay performance, like the power couple.
Exactly.
Great point. I was a little thrown off because, I think by Friday we learned that they were going to perform God Did, and they let us know that as if we would all see it. And then at some point in the night, they had mentioned the performers in the lead up, and then Trevor mentions like after the show. And I was really thrown off by that because sometimes, they usually go to the late show, in this case, Stephen Colbert's show. And I'm like, is this because they're late? Did they push this performance off the Grammys, which I can't ever remember happening. But they used weird semantics, but they should have just said closing the show. Because at one point I'm just asking myself, is that why they're late? Is that, is this a scheduling thing? But as we'll talk about later, the night ended how it ended.
I don't recall them saying off the show. I mean, it was definitely part of the show.
After the show, I think was the words that Trevor used. And I was really thrown off, but obviously he wouldn't have.
You sure he didn't say after the break?
I don't think so. And for anyone that's listening or watching, let me know if I'm mistaken on that.
Yeah. Well, all right, cool. So you wanna talk about the show itself? So I want to go a little bit out of order because I think the biggest moment for both you and I, and for the, people who listen, is probably wasn't the finale, but so we talked about the lead up with Slick Rick. One of the things that is an annual recurrence for the Grammys is the in memoriam section, where they honor people who have been lost over the past year. And typically it's a reel with images and kind of somber music, and then occasionally there is like a medley of folks who are connected to people who died. This year was a really, really powerful one. In particular, I thought Quavo's tribute to Takeoff was extremely moving. I've read that he was actually holding Takeoff's chain while he did the performance, and the song itself, and I think the song came out a few weeks ago, but I also felt it was a little unsettling, just given like how complicated that scenario was with Quavo being there when it happened, and the assertions that it was because of an altercation that he had been in that it happened. Like it was a very complicated feeling for me. But what did you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. It was a powerful performance. I would say too, I was unsettled every year. I mean, you know, and we spoke about it last year. 2022 was marred by deaths. I was disappointed. I don't believe the Grammys honored Gangsta Boo, who died, and they didn't mention Granddaddy IU. There was a few artists that just got lost in the sauce, and that always makes me sad. And that was my main takeaway. I thought the performance itself, the medley with, you know, to your point, you know, Mick Fleetwood and folks that were connected to some of the larger names that were lost was great. Quavo did the damn thing. But yeah, no great insights there.
Yeah, yeah. And then Beyonce, we talked about. So the thing that did happen for her is she became the most awarded artist of all time. Has 33 Grammys now after winning Best R&B Song for Cuff It, and then Best Dance Electronic Music Album for Renaissance. That big deal, you know, like you said, she wasn't there for the first one, The Dream, accepted the award for her, and Nile Rodgers with The Dream saying that she was on CP time. You know,
Yeah.
the Nile Rodgers thing was cool because I had no idea he was affiliated with the project. And just thinking about that dude, man, that dude has been relevant for what, 6 decades now?
Yeah.
It's just absurd, just how talented and impactful he's been, and like major hits in every decade, you know, from Good Times to, you know,
David Bowie.
to Get Lucky, and like, you know, yeah, David Bowie, Get Lucky for Daft Punk, and David Bowie, Let's Dance. But yeah, crazy, man. So
It was great to see him. There was, you know, as always happens, there was a little bit of weirdness, you know, of like, I think when the Dream stopped, the music started, and then the world realized like, nah. And that was cool. And I like that he got some time. That was a highlight. Yeah. Do you want to speak about the other performances, or do you want to get into the big filet mignon moment of the night?
well, I want to talk about it. So I want to talk about a couple of surprise wins
Okay.
first, you know, and then, you know, let's talk Kendrick. But surprise wins, I was shocked that Lizzo won Record of the Year. That blew me away, especially, you know, given how big of a record Break My Soul was for Beyonce. It almost felt like to me like there was a little like Grammy hate going on there. Like and I read this fascinating piece on Variety last week. They took 5 people anonymously, but it was 5 different demos. So one was like a manager, one was like a record exec, one was a new artist, and, you know, a couple other categories.
Yeah.
And they asked them for how they were voting on 5 different categories. You know, one was like best album, one was record of the year, song of the year, and so forth. And it was fascinating to see the thought process. There was only one out of the 5 that like actually said, you know, I'm voting for this because of the artistic merit. Most of it came down to, you know, I want ABBA because, you know, ABBA's been around for a long time, and no, this isn't their best product, but they deserve a Grammy. There was, no, I'm not going to give it to Beyonce or Adele because they always win. You know, there was a lot of stuff that had nothing to do with evaluating the music itself, which is just absolutely crazy to me, and what you speculate is happening, but to see it like right there, that's when I knew that Kendrick wasn't going to win Album of the Year. I think I told you before the show that it wasn't going to happen. And so I think that Beyonce had some backlash because, like, you think about, and no shade to Lizzo at all. Lizzo, you could see, was shocked that she won that, and even gave flowers to Beyonce. And almost, she didn't go full Macklemore and apologize, but she was like, "Yo, you're the artist of, you know, you're the artist of the decade. You're, you know, the biggest artist ever, whatever." You know, she gave her props there. But that was a real surprise to me. The other one was Song of the Year with Bonnie Raitt winning for her song, and like she looked stunned. Like she looked like she hadn't prepared anything. Like she looked like a deer in the headlights. She was just like shocked into stillness for a minute. It was like, come on, man, what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I got to work very briefly. You know, I sat on a 3-hour call with Bonnie Raitt last year, and one of the things that blew me away is somebody who's, you know, family members liked her music. Like, she is incredibly modest and humble, and I couldn't tell because you texted me that. And I couldn't tell if she was stunned or that's just Bonnie Raitt for you. The Lizzo thing, I agree, you know, and I want to ask you something. You know, we've talked
She said,
about.
"I can't believe this happened." She
Yeah,
was
but
stunned, dog. Come on, man. There was
let me ask,
there was no interpreting. Like,
somebody pointed out something on Twitter that I didn't realize regarding Lizzo's album. You know, the only way that you know, if you win a Grammy and I produced a song or I featured on it, the only way I won a Grammy too is if you get album of the year. Like, you know, when Quincy Jones won Back on the Block, all of those artists won Grammys. A lot of them, you know, on the hip hop side, that was the only Grammy they've ever gotten. So interestingly enough, somebody pointed out, there's actually another journalist, Jesse Fairfax on Twitter, pointed out on Lizzo's album, which was up for album of the year, which she did not win, Quelle Chris produced on that album, which I didn't realize. And I thought that that was so interesting because Lizzo, whatever music she makes now, which I don't know how to categorize it, you know, in terms of genre, but she has roots in the hip hop underground. And it's cool that like a lot of artists like Macklemore and Ryan Lewis, she carries some of that with her. And that was one of the most times I've ever gotten to see Lizzo speak on a stage that big. I know I'll read headlines where she'll do stuff on Instagram and whatnot, but that was, I agree with you, that one came as a shock to me. Do you think, like, had Lizzo won album of the year and not Kendrick, do you still qualify her as a hip hop artist?
Lizzo, I've never qualified Lizzo as a
Okay.
hip hop. She's a singer. I mean, she's one of the biggest singers there is. A big voice, that is. You know what I'm talking about.
I do, but I mean, to me, I
So
very much equated to like a Post Malone or an MGK, you know, like, you know, she is an artist. Lizzo's rapped, you know, very much. Even on, like, you get it a little bit on hits. I know that that's not like flowing, but I'm always curious, like, how do we treat her? You know,
I
yeah,
mean, she raps a little bit, but her singing is like, I'd say 80 to 90% of it, you know, and
okay,
uh, you know, she is like, she blows, like she really like sings, you know what I
yeah.
mean? So her speech was great, and you know, obviously her messaging is awesome, like body positivity. And actually a person I worked with at BET back in the day, who started off as an intern and became a producer, produced her reality show. I don't know if you saw that the person who introduced her was one of the dancers that she chose as part of this reality show.
Mm-mm.
Neka, who was this intern and became a producer, actually won an Emmy for that. Like, she's
Wow.
like done unbelievable work since then. So Lizzo has like, she's got an entire ecosystem around her. She's built up people who are plus size. She's built up, like, you know, trans people and the queer community. She like is an entire, like she has an entire like orbit around her, which is pretty dope. So it's cool that she won. I'm just shocked that it happened in light of Beyonce, you know.
Word. Yeah, and with that, one of the things that I thought was really interesting is Beyonce in her, you know, acceptance speech honoring the queer community, which she did for, I think it was it Best Electronic Recording? That I think they
Best dance
dance.
slash electronic music. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, she made this album, and I thought it was really, like, you know, you and I didn't spend a ton of time talking about it last summer, but you know, very much rooted in house music and all of that. And I thought it was really cool that she used that moment to kind of highlight that. One of the other things, one of the more cringe moments of the night, I would say, was Madonna. I mean, that whole
Wow.
speech was
Yeah.
rough.
Yep.
Madonna beckoning, and you know, Madonna has continued to be in a very weird place in the public eye over the last 5 so years. But to watch one superstar of years past handle herself and handle trying to speak to marginalized communities versus another person in Beyonce that just did it so eloquently, I thought that that was one of the more interesting moments later in the night.
Yeah, man. I was thinking it must be really tough aging as a sex symbol. You
Yeah.
know, trying to think of people who've done it well. You know, I think that you know, I think that Eartha Kitt was great. Lena Horne, like I'm trying to think of others who have done it, but I think the ones who have been most successful are the ones who have done so naturally and who've embraced age as not as something to be afraid of, but something that happens to all of us, and like, wearing it proudly. And Madonna doesn't seem to be doing that right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One of the things that wasn't televised, but Future was there. I will say, as we say into kind of talking about the hip hop breadbasket of the night, I'm not mad at Future winning a Grammy for Wait for You. That is, of the 4 rap categories, the best melodic. I'll just tell you point blank, especially this year and last. It's not a category I care very much about. Often those songs nominated are not the songs that are close to my heart or close to the Ambrosia for Heads coverage. But you and I speculated briefly, but like Future's kind of a polarizing figure, somebody who has a ton of success, but is not like Grammy polished, I would say. So he was in the building. It was funny. He was sitting at a table. It was him, Little Durk, and Ice-T. I saw that as they were panning the crowd, and Coco, and that just made me laugh of, folks that make provocative rap in different eras in different ways. But if not for that, Kendrick would have swept the rap categories last night.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the last surprising one, and you called this to my attention, was Robert Glasper winning best R&B album for Black Radio 3. Black Radio 3. So you want to talk about the controversy that happened around that?
Yeah, so I mean, he competed against Chris Brown, and Chris Brown, has a weird, complicated history with the Grammys. I mean, has had some highlight reel moments, and then I guess it was 2009 after the Grammys. That was when Rihanna and Chris Brown's, famed incident happened, correct?
Yep, that's
and
right.
Chris Brown went on IG Live and discredited Robert Glasper and said, basically, I won't direct quote, but who the hell is this? And that really disappointed me because, I feel like the music community has shot Chris Brown a lot of bail. And, throughout the years, he continues to kind of show his immaturity. And, it's one thing if it's an artist that is super undeserving. But Robert Glasper, I mean, has put in 25 years of work, far beyond that. And what he's done on the live stage, what he's done on albums, what he's done on other people's albums is insane. I mean, he is not only somebody that is incredibly deserving and has won Grammys before, but is somebody that represents why I feel like there's still hope in bringing awareness. And unfortunately, that particular award was not televised, but Black Radio 3, I mean, you have an element of it on our playlist right now, the collaboration with Mac Miller. But there's really incredible songs on that throughout. You and I have texted each other a number of them.
Yeah, that one wasn't on the album.
I'm looking now, and you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. But I did have the Pasta News song, the song you had with Big Crit on it, and D Smoke. Like, there was heavy representation of that album on the playlist. I'd say a couple things. So one, yeah, Chris Brown, man, continues to shoot himself in the foot. It's weird to me because it's been a few years now since Chris has done something that was, I think, head scratch worthy. Like, I thought he kind of turned the corner. He's had his daughter. He's in his 30s now. He's maturing. But, it is what it is. Second thing, though, is that I question, when I look back on it, I wonder, was this album in the right category? Because this is one of my favorite albums of last year. I think it is one of the best albums of last year. But when I think about how to categorize it,
right.
At first I was like, man, is it more rap even? Because it's got a lot of rappers on it. But I looked at the entire guest list, and it's very, very diverse. But Glasper has always been a jazz artist, and to me, this is a modern jazz album. And modern jazz can have different elements. You saw that with like Branford Marsalis back in the day, and with Roy Hargrove, like, rest in peace. To me, this is a modern jazz album, and maybe the problem was the placement rather than Glasper himself. But Chris went at Glasper personally, and it was like, who is this? Like, like really trying to diminish him. So like, that's inexcusable, but it does beg the question for me as to whether or not it was in the right category.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky one too, because there's another category which I don't necessarily agree with, but progressive R&B album, which last night Steve Lacy won, Thundercat has won in the past. Last night, Terrace Martin was nominated. Last year, Glasper, Terrace Martin, and Ninth Wonder and Kamasi Washington were nominated. So it's weird because I don't know that there's a whole lot of difference sonically and thematically, to push that into a different box. But it's wild to me because, I mean, speaking to the thing that you shared a moment ago of how people vote, Chris Brown is a superstar, and while his name might conjure negative images or negative histories for some of the voters, it's wild that Glasper gets that, and I think very deservingly so. And that was just disappointing because you're right. Like, I thought Chris had turned the page from that kind of behavior. I remember when him and Frank Ocean were going at it back in the day, and that was kind of the last time I really remember being like, Chris, grow up.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway.
Yeah. All right. So we touched on it already, but Kendrick took 3 out of the 4 major rap categories. Best song, best record for the Heart Part 5, in both cases.
Best rap performance. Yeah.
Yeah, best rap performance. Yep. And which is weird too, right? Because you have best records for certain categories, you get best rap performance. Like, I don't understand these distinctions here, but in any case, he won those 2. He lost the best melodic, which I think you and I thought was quite possible. And then he won best rap album for Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Pusha T definitely looked disappointed to me, when I saw him. And Jack Harlow also looked kind of shit, and to your point, he was ironically the dark horse in this one. And so, but no surprises here for us, right?
No, that comes naturally. It was cool that Kendrick was there for the one award. And again, that fact explains to me some of why the Grammys didn't want to put multiple of these categories on stage, especially in years past when somebody goes up there the first time, they say what they have to say, and then the second time or third time, that's when you start to see sometimes soapboxing. I'm not saying you could ever get that from Kendrick or political commentary or things like that, but it was what it was. None of that came as a huge surprise to me. Kendrick, by my count, now has 17 Grammys. And just for context, you talked about Beyonce making history last night. Bruce Springsteen has 20. So Kendrick continues to just really stash away the trophies, and deservingly so. His last 3 albums have all gotten the best rap album distinction. So, and
he's coming up on being the most decorated rap artist. Jay-Z holds that distinction now. Him and Kanye, I think, were tied at 23. I think with actually, I think he and Kanye are still tied at 23. So who knows, man? Another album or 2, Kendrick could be really knocking at that door, which is pretty crazy.
All the more reason why I'll be taking you to Sizzler this year, man. So.
Yeah. All right, man. So let's talk about the performances. That's why people, I think, tune in for the most part for the Grammys. Or would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've always enjoyed the awards. I like that, but I think most people. I've watched the Grammys, as I'm sure you have, with a lot of other people, and folks wait on the performances. So yeah, man. Why don't I start with one that I think is tributary to hip hop? How did you feel about Stevie Wonder and Smokey Robinson in the tribute to Berry Gordy and Smokey?
It was great, man. Really awesome. The part that I enjoyed the most was Stevie Wonder and Chris Stapleton playing. When Stevie was on that whatever that boxy hat was super dope. Man, I've been fortunate enough to see basically a rendition of that tribute in person, like 8, 9, 10 years ago. Actually, probably like 11 years ago at this point, 11 or 12 years ago. BT Honors, BT has a show called BT Honors. These happen every February, and it was really a night to spotlight, Black excellence in every category. And one year we gave Berry Gordy the Visionary Award, and I'll never forget. He got on stage and he said, "Being a visionary means proving to the world that you're not crazy." that just resonated with me, stuck with me forever.
You've quoted that a number of times to me.
Yeah. And Smokey and Stevie were there performing. I believe Aretha Franklin was there performing. Dude, there was at one point where I was on stage and I met both Barry Gordy and Smokey Robinson together, and I just, thanked them for, and, talked about how my mom was going to be so thrilled that I met them. And I wanted to meet Aretha Franklin. I saw her in a side room, but she looked like she's in kind of like a pretty intense conversation with someone. And like, I read the room and didn't do it. And I was like, I'll do it at some point. And then like she died like,
Wow.
not that long after that. Aretha Franklin though, man, like was huge in my childhood. She earned me $25,000 at some point. And, that's the story for another day. But yeah, man. So seeing that unfold on the Grammy stage was cool, but I'd seen a rendition of that in other places. But what about you?
I agree with you. I mean, I really thought Stevie's performance was great. I mean, Smokey is such a legend to me. Because of my mom, because of my uncle, like I grew up entrenched in Motown, and not just the hits, but deeper Motown. And I love seeing Barry there. I mean, keeping the low profile, but standing up. It appeared he stood up. It was cool. They showed from the back of the crowd and he was up. Like he was the lone stander early in the performance, just watching what he helped create. And, Smokey's at a point where, it's clear his voice is not as strong, but who can fault that, given his age, given what he's been through, but he's still a showman. He still defies however old he is, and Stevie has that charm and that instrumentation. It was really beautiful, and I'm glad. I know that throughout the Grammys history there have been a series of times where they stopped to honor Motown in various different looks, but I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, man, Smokey's 82 years old. I think he looks great. I thought he sounded great. Like really, really cool to see, man. And we can't take for granted how much longer we're gonna have these legends with us. So it's dope.
Absolutely. Other performances of note before we get to the big one for you?
Other performances of note, I liked Brandy Carlisle a lot. I saw her, I listened to her album for the first time yesterday, kind of in preparation because I wanted to see what it was all about, and I think it was really strong. Who else performed? Bad Bunny was okay to me, nothing like earth-shattering. I thought Lizzo was great. I thought Lizzo was really, really good. Like I said, the Quavo performance definitely did impact me. Sam Smith was cool. What I thought was interesting about that is he did that song on SNL just a few weeks ago, and a lot of times with these big award shows, they put embargoes on performances of songs on TV because they don't want it to, kind of be burned out. So I was surprised that he was allowed to do it. And maybe it was just outside that window, but typically it's, a couple months or so. So, but he always got a ton. And I didn't realize that the woman on that record was trans.
Yeah, me neither.
I thought it was incredibly cool for him to let her do the speech.
Yep.
I thought that was like just such a G move, man. So yeah, I thought that was very cool.
My fiance pointed that out to me, and I thought that was really interesting. And then he got a chance to speak later in the night, maybe, right? He won something else, or
no, I don't think he did. He did. He just let her have the shine, which was dope.
One other thing I want to ask, and this is unrelated to the performance, but I think that covers it. How did you feel about this whole thing with the fans for the album of the year?
I was trying to figure out what they were trying to accomplish because, it wasn't they weren't particularly social clips. The payoff was at the end, with them letting the grandmother give the award to Harry Styles. That was kind of cool. You know what I mean? But I thought it was a lot of stuff to get to that payoff. What about you?
Yeah, it kind of reminded me, and this came from my living room. I didn't come up with this point, but like it reminded me a little bit of a college admissions catalog of like they were trying to find people that they thought that CBS thought would identify with those artists, with the exception of the grandmother. Like that was the wild card. But with each artist, it was like, they're trying to find like what this represents in the world. And it seemed a little bit reachy to me, and it took up a lot of airspace again. So on one hand, I think the Grammys, underlying is trying to show this is really about the fans, but the rest of the night, that doesn't always line up. I thought that was interesting. You're absolutely right on the payoff. That was cool. But other than that, I was like, man, you wasted like 20 minutes of time.
Yeah, because it was extensive. It was not just short chunks. I was like, wow, okay, those are like tune-out moments. That's dangerous because anything like that, anyone watching live, that's when a person's going to turn away. So, but I do give it up to them for trying something new. They're trying to break up the format, and so that was cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get to the, 2 or 3 big hip hop moments of the night. And I think we should start with the biggest, don't you?
Well, depends on how we define the biggest.
Word. All right.
Yeah. I'll say, so here's the thing. I think that the thing that people were most anticipating on a mainstream level was probably the God Did performance by DJ Khaled featuring Rick Ross, Lil Wayne, JAY-Z, John Legend, and I keep forgetting the other dudes.
Friday, with 2 Y's.
Friday, okay. And so this is a performance. So typically the Grammys will have at least 1 or 2 performances that are outdoors. And this is the one they did that way this year. DJ Khaled said it at the end. They basically let them do an entire 9-minute song, which is insane. Typically a person gets a verse and a half, a verse and a chorus. And they keep it moving. They want to keep it quick and get as many songs as possible in there. On top of that, Jay-Z did his entire 4-minute verse, which, broke the internet at the time. The setting was the Last Supper. The whole theme of the album is God Did, and you got the song is God Did, and you got Hove in the middle, playing the Jesus role. And on the one side, he had his dudes from back in the day, Emery, and I forget the other dude.
OG1.
And G1, yeah.
OG1, yeah.
OG1 at his sides, and you got this big long table full of food and everything, so the imagery, the symbolism is crazy. And Wayne does his thing in the street, Ross does his thing, and Hov does his entire verse sitting down. That to me kind of took away from the energy of it. I would have preferred to see Jay more animated. I get what they're trying to accomplish, but I don't think it came across as well as they probably hoped. And overall, for such an epic moment and song and an opportunity, I felt like it left me wanting a bit more. But what about you?
Yeah, I felt the same. I know there are folks on social media that I saw as I went to bed after the awards that vehemently disagree with me. And that song itself and that verse was incredibly polarizing to people. You and I, spoke transparently about my initial reaction versus yours. And I've since come around and realized, the true beauty of Jay's verse and why it is one of the finest of 2022. That is the first time they've ever performed that song. So with that, the first time it's ever been on television. I agree with you. So I've always been a fan, just strictly performing wise, of Big Daddy Kane more than Rakim. Kane is jumping and doing acrobatics and, high intensity. And Jay has done those performances in his career, and he's probably done them on the Grammy stage. You have Rakim, who also performed last night, and we'll talk about that, who's often more laid back, just kicking the rhymes to you, has that more docile approach. And for me to watch Jay sit down, largely cover his face with the mic, he spit clearly, which is more than I can say for Wayne. It wasn't all that to me. And then, I get the symbolism. I thought the way with kind of the mist of the night and the neon, it was wild to see LA like that. That was powerful. And Jay, I think, spends the majority of his time in California now, so it was symbolic of him being a king out there, as has become Puff and these other people, which there's a lot of hip hop subtext, because you would have never thought that 25 or 30 years ago, or closer to 25. But, they're running things. I thought that was cool. I thought the table was neat. He has Juan, he has Emery beside him. They could have been co-defendants, but instead they are two Black millionaires, sitting with a Black billionaire in the center. Like, that's power. And then you have Wayne and Ross playing into it. Everyone was cool. DJ Khaled's enthusiasm is a big part of his brand. I'm never going to criticize a man's faith. Like, at the top of his performance, he got on his knees and kind of, did witnessing, or spiritual. But, his stuff at the end and thanking the Academy, it wasn't a remarkable performance to me, in the annals of Grammy performances. I do think, Khaled being a Roc Nation managed artist, they are doing what they can collectively. His affiliates from Ross and Wayne to Jay, three men that have been very integral to Khaled's career, to remind and to appeal that this man is a superstar, and he very well may be. And I love seeing Khaled at other points in the night showing his hip hop roots and his fandom, but it was a little bit disjointed to me, and it was not the Jay-Z at the Grammys moment I had hoped for.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that it would have felt like it had more energy had it been inside?
No.
Yeah.
I think the outdoor part was cool. I don't know. And you've produced television, award shows and things like that. I mean, a performance like that being as long as it is, and the tempo and energy of the song, it has to come at the end of the night, right? Like, you can't do that at 9:30, right? Like, that's far too long, and you're risking people that are not invested of turning away, correct?
No, I disagree with that vehemently, because the thing we're going to talk about after this, I believe, came in at around the same kind of running time.
Yeah, but that's a different.
But it had a different level of energy,
Exactly.
And but that's the point, though, right? It's not about the time; it's about the energy,
And it's about the audience. And to me, like, your folks, and I know it aired close to midnight by the time it was over, but your folks that came for 60 minutes and stayed for the Grammys, I don't know that they're gonna sit through 8 minutes of that,
But that's what I'm saying, though, too. Like, I think middle of the night is okay, and I think inside is better, because I think that crowd reaction does make a difference. Being in the room, hearing the crowd like react to things, and like as soon as like Wayne comes up, you hear like thunderous applause, and then then Jay comes up, you hear the reaction. It's like being in a movie theater watching Independence Day versus watching Independence Day by yourself on the couch. Like, it's completely different experiences. So
that's a really good point. Tinfoil hat moment for me. Do you think there's any symbolism to that performance not being in the building? Of, again, does J and B even show up if not for the album of the year thing? Like, is it the fact that they're already outside? They've already, like, get off, take your mic off, go home. Like, is there a reason in the eyes of the star of that song, which is Jay-Z, that it's outdoors?
So I wonder, a lot of times with those shows, they actually allow crowd participation, so there's an audience around there. So I wonder if there was an audience seeing it. Maybe they wanted to open it up to the people, to create more of a social moment. So I'm not sure, or maybe it was the size of the set. I'm not sure, but in any case, I was looking forward to it, but it didn't have the impact on me that I was hoping for.
Yeah, that's fair. And one thing I'll say is there's a lot of great hip hop that doesn't always translate to the stage. I mean, especially through the pandemic, like, there's music that sounds great in the car, great in headphones, great at the gym, that's not always gonna be set for that. But to your point you started to make, there was an even longer sequence that had over 15, by my count, 17 or 18 songs that were fit for the Grammy stage.
That absolutely blew me away. So we knew this was coming, right? It was announced, like late January or so. Questlove announced that there was, it's actually early January. Early January is announced that Questlove was going to curate a tribute to Hip Hop 50 for the Grammys. And, it's the Roots. They got a lot of pull. They've played with everyone in the world. you have expectations, but it seemed like it was going to probably skew a bit more old school, and be 4 or 5 artists, whatever. And it starts off LL Cool J after having announced Dr. Dre, who won an award too. That's another moment we didn't talk about, but Dr. Dre became the first ever to win the Cultural Impact Award, and it's now called the Dr. Dre Cultural Impact Award, or
Global Impact, yeah.
Global Impact Award. After Dre comes up and accepts this award, LL starts talking about Hip Hop 50, and and out comes Run DMC, and they're doing Rock Box and
Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. Even before that, though, if I want to jump in,
go ahead.
One thing that I love that LL did is, and this is something that's really become more and more as we talk about inclusivity and properly telling history. LL, traced hip hop back. He gave the history note of August 11th, 1973,
right?
And he said not only Kool Herc, but he gave props to his sister Cynthia. And one of the things that we talk about Cardi B winning that award in 2019, like women are pioneers too, and from the very thing that we're celebrating, it's Herc and it's his sister. And I thought that that's really interesting, especially given the fact of Herc was not part of the performers, but immediately they kick it over to another pioneer, another first 1970s Bronx pioneer in Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. And that to me was amazing because I it's not covered, but these guys, there have been Flash and there's been the Furious Five. And even through, Lifetime Achievement Awards, through Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductions, these guys have not been necessarily in orbit together. There's been issues. There were issues in the 80s with how their contracts were going and how they were working. So to see Melly Mel, I believe Scorpio, Flat, to see those guys on stage together was incredible.
Yeah, that was insane. Mel looking super diesel as always. And then you got Run and D, and then dude, I thought it was going to be 4 or 5, and over the course of the performance, I don't have the exact order. I'm sure you do, but you have Rakim, Salt and Pepper, Queen Latifah, De La Soul, Jazzy Jeff cutting with LL, Nelly, Missy, DJ Drama, The Lox, Busta Rhymes, Public Enemy, Scarface, Method Man, Big Boy. Then you get into current artists like Glorilla and Lil Baby and Lil Uzi Vert, all with the Roots. Dude, it was absolutely mind blowing. And you said 17 songs. You got the song. You got the track list.
Yeah, I mean, I can read through it, and I might be a little bit off on this. But to me, the medley started with, there was an allusion to Grandmaster Flash and the Wheels of Steel at the top. Into the Message with Run DMC was King of Rock. Jazzy Jeff and the Roots move into Rock the Bells. There's several flashes back to LL. Salt and Pepper with My Mic Sounds Nice, which I thought immediately it was going to be Push It, and they went there, which again, the curation is dope because hip hop heads, that's just kind of an Easter egg for folks in the know. They switch over to Rakim, who I believe does Eric B as president. Public Enemy with Rebel Without a Pause. Posthumous comes out for De La, does his Buddy verse. Scarface does the Ghetto Boys Mind Playing Tricks on Me. Ice-T does New Jack Hustler Nino's theme. Queen Latifah, UNITY. Method Man does his title song, not You're All I Need, or he came out doing Method Man. Big Boy hits the stage to do ATL Leon's verse. Busta Rhymes with Spliff Star do Put Your Hands Where My Eyes Can See. Missy Elliott, Lose Control, Nelly Hot in Here, Too Short, Blow the Whistle. That was interesting too, because that's a song 25 years into Short's career. And then the Lox, all 3 Lox with DJ Drama behind them, do Jadakiss We Gonna Make It. And I know Styles was on the song, but it's important to note that Chic was there. And then like you said, they do Little Baby and Glorilla and Little Uzi Vert. And I'm embarrassed. I'm going to show my age. I don't know which of those songs each did.
Well, they did F and F for sure for Glorilla. Lil Baby and Uzi, I don't remember, but yeah, F&F for sure for Gorilla.
I
And I
mean,
think
I was,
Busta snuck. I think he snuck "Look at Me Now" in there too a little bit.
oh yeah. There was
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
splits. And the one thing I didn't say too is at one point they flashed it back to the center of the stage and it was LL and Black Thought. And they did kind of, it appeared like a freestyle, but it was kind of a rendition of, was it Double Trouble? I mean, it was one of those like wild style records, you know, because I'm down by law. And I, you know, do you remember what that was?
I can't remember. I got to go back and look
It
at
was
it.
one of
Yeah.
those like Grandmaster Caz, you know, like iconic, you know, and it embarrasses me. Like it was one of the things, and we'll have it right in the article that this appears in. But yeah,
Yeah, no, but dude, it was one after another, and like you said, it wasn't the gigantic songs, but it was the songs that were truly hip hop, the things that like put these artists on the map in most cases, or like they're like it was basically like a Quest DJ set. It wasn't just the obvious. But it was all like super dope stuff, incredible.
and he was you know, he played throughout, even though there was DJs. And you know, it's interesting. At one point, you pull back to see, you know, there were at least two stages right there, but there were stages in the middle. I mean, it was shaped like that, where you know, and then there was a center in the crowd stage. So a couple other things to note. At one point, there's LED boards that are listing everyone in hip hop imaginable, you know, and it's a true cross section. Like you and I pride ourselves on AFH being a cross section of hip hop. You had names like Spice One, Murs, Aesop Rock, People Under the Stairs, you know, Little Brother, Flow Rida, you know, like everybody in hip hop's name, just to show you how intertwined this culture is. So that was one. Two, I loved the way that the crowd reacted. At one point, you know, I alluded to it a moment ago, DJ Khaled runs towards the stage and it almost seemed like people were like, what's going on here? And he's just holding up his phone to document the moment. You saw Jay-Z vibing out. You saw Tyler. At one point, I'm watching
Taylor Swift.
Well, Taylor, but Shania Twain's losing her ish over UNITY, which made me
Oh
laugh.
wow.
You know, Jay and Steve Stout and Pharrell, and you know, you're watching all of these people in the crowd truly bask in the glory. And you know, like hip hop 50s all year long. You know, we haven't come near August yet. We're still, you know, more than 6 months away, just about. But you know, this celebration is going to be going on all year, and for the Grammys to make that first huge mark, I thought was massive. And you
Massive
know,
for a stage that has not been so kind to hip hop over the years, including last night at times. That was the biggest hip hop tribute I've ever seen at one setting, on a stage like that. And speaking of Jay, like I'm looking at him and I'm wondering if him and Kendrick are like, damn, I wish I was in this, because like it was such a moment and they're such big parts of the culture, there was nothing lacking about it. Imagine
yeah,
if it also had Kendrick, Jay, and Drake and Cole. Like it was incredible, man. The
I
only other
think
tribute I can think of that even came close, and this is before I even went back and looked at who was in it. And it doesn't compare, but like
you say
at the
Motown
end of
25.
at the end of Arsenio, when
Okay.
Arsenio did when his final show, he got an incredible tribute from Yo-Yo, MC Light, Tretch, Fife,
That's right.
Q-Tip, Fu-Schnickens, CL Smooth, Guru, Das Effects, entire Wu-Tang Clan, KRS-One, Mad Lion, and Pete Rock. It was pretty dope.
Or the Yo MTV, that classic, you know,
Yeah, that
that
one too. Rakim and like,
I
yeah.
thought you were even going to say Motown 25, but you're so right. Like it absolutely was amazing. It was amazing on that stage. I wondered the same thing about Jay. And, you know, Jay and a lot of artists at that level are selfish because they have a right to be. And I use the word selfish, meaning like you don't need anyone else. But hip hop is about community. And I wondered the same thing, like in his mind somewhere, because his history as Kendrick's, as Eminem's, as Drake's, as J. Cole's, are so important to this culture. do you wonder if you participate in that moment? I wondered if Andre 3000 is sitting at home somewhere being like, yo, I should have been out there with Big. Like,
Yeah.
but I
And
say
these guys are
that,
fans. Like Jay and Kendrick are fans.
right.
Like, like I know this for a fact. These guys are fans of the music. And that was the most animated I saw Jay all night. He was legitimately happy about that. So yeah.
It means so much, to hip hop, but also I love the fact that you get those moments. Like, Outkast means so much. I would contend that Big verse is one of the three best Outkast verses, period, just in terms of what we know. So to have Posthumous out there doing, a really commanding verse as a solo artist. I mean, representing De La, of sure, but to get that moment, to see Salt and Pepper do that, it was interesting. Like Jazzy Jeff, one of his most famed routines is to rock the bells. Obviously, he wasn't part of the production of the song, but to watch that interplay of Jeff and LL was amazing. Rock him out there. He redid the lyrics, to make it all about himself, like owning his greatness alone. Like there was a lot of subtext and a lot of interesting stuff there. And yeah. And one thing I do want to say too, LL set the moment up incredibly. At one point in the night, like LL, somebody who's taken hip hop roots and done all of these other things with it is Queen Latifah. And she announced, and I could hear like the KRS-One, "We will be here forever" in my head. But she said, hip hop will live everywhere forever. And she said it with that kind of assertion. And I loved that proclamation. And I love that it came from Queen La.
Yeah, for sure, man. For sure. Yeah, man. There's great representation, not only generationally, but also gender wise too. And so, mad props to Questlove, even though you have huge expectations of him being who he is and the incredible knowledge and access he has, like that one, like well surpassed my expectations. So that was super dope.
Mine too. I was honestly not about Quest at all, but just knowing, what's available in terms of TV time and space and all of that, I was thinking something along the lines of, like a 5-song medley. When I saw Salt and Pepper, I was like, oh, that's cool. We'll see Push It, This was for the heads and it was incredible. And I love the fact. I think that the folks that, are in their, at whatever age, the takeaway from the night was this performance, hands down.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So yeah, you got anything else on Grammys this week or?
Not really. I mean, you said the Dr. Dre Award. It was cool that Dre showed up, did that. We'll see that live forever. I think this covers it really well.
Dope. All right. So then as we traditionally close, what's your song of the week?
Man, you go first.
Mine is by La Russell. La Russell is a name that, I've heard here and there, but was in the zeitgeist this past week. So I finally started to give it a listen and went on a deep dive. And he's got he's got 2 projects already out in 2023. So that's 2 in the first month. But one called Omaha. There's a song called If I Knew Then. It's on our playlist, our Spotify playlist, which is regularly updated, and it's just super dope. Like he's got this real casual conversational type delivery, but he's saying like all sorts of deep stuff that like you're like, oh wow, I can't believe you went there. And this is one of those songs that shows that best.
It's funny. I've been asking people all week. You put me on. I've listened to both projects. I've listened to Omaha twice now. The playlist is what hooked me in. Really enjoy that one. And what's crazy, he's not even from Omaha. He's from Vallejo, California. Yeah. But that project in particular reminds me, let La Russell be himself. But the joy and the happiness and the ease of that project, it's great for this time of year. I'm gonna pick a deep cut. So I watched the show. I'm high adrenaline, just like ready to cover whatever you and I are talking, figuring out this episode. And I go to bed. I'm falling asleep, and Charlemagne the God and Little Duval had spotlit a song by an artist we've covered named Transley. And Transley is an artist from Alabama. Briefly was on T.I.'s Grand Hustle. and made some of my favorite music in 2017 and 2016. Was like absolutely an artist that I think, again, you put me on to, that I just, everything he did I wanted to hear. And they put out, he has a real interesting song called Each Other. It's actually it's from 2018, and it asks a lot of questions, and it kind of positions himself as an artist trying to make it independently against all these things that, you know, he's seeing working for other artists, all these things that he's being messaged from superstars. Absolutely outstanding. So, you know, just shows you that there's music that you can hear for the first time that's not brand new, and it's not it's not 20 years old, and it's still great. And that song, I listened to it 5 times before I went to bed. So
that's dope. I remember liking him quite a bit. So yeah, that's dope, man.
absolutely, man. Well, yo, this was great. Shout out to Hip Hop 50. One thing, if you made it this far in the episode, please hit that like button, leave a comment wherever you stream this video on any of the apps, give us a review, help spread the word. We do this for engagement. We do this as an extension of, you know, covering hip hop on Ambrosia for Heads.com, and you and I both working in this combined damn near 50 years. So
Yeah.
this is an act of love and care for the culture, and we want to hear what you think and need your support that way.
For sure. All right, man. Always a pleasure.
Likewise, man. Until we do it again.
All right. Peace.
All right, peace.